Better World Blueprint. Good humans doing good things.
Christmas time has its own brand of chaos. Many of us are just putting one foot in front of the other to make it to the end of the year as we attempt to ready ourselves for family events and holidays. In this episode of A Better World Blueprint, I invite you to set all that down, to spend the next 15 minutes or so absorbing the words and life of someone who's chosen to make this world a better place, and to enjoy a special kind of Christmas spirit. The Wayside Chapel is located in Sydney's King's Cross. In the heart of a bustling city, it opens its doors to anyone in need. The pastor and CEO of Wayside is Jon Owen, a man who chose long ago to live a life with meaning and purpose. Every year, Wayside hosts a street party on Christmas Day, so I thought it would be fitting to speak to Jon for this episode. I hope you enjoy this chat as much as I did. Hello, Jon. Welcome to A Better World Blueprint.
Hello, Siobhan. What an honour it is to be able to prattle on for a little bit with you.
I love it. So have you always known that this is the area that you wanted to work in, that is social justice and working in social work? Or did you have a particular wake-up moment where you realised that was your calling?
Look, I didn't grow up knowing that this was ever going to be my destiny. I've never had a 5-year plan. I've rarely even had a 6-week plan. I was kind of just rolling on in life, but it was with a sense of deep dissatisfaction, to be perfectly frank. And I would often go to bed at night saying, I can do this, in terms of, it wasn't from a sense of arrogance. It was, okay, if the path before me is go to school, graduate, go on to university, get a degree, start working, buy 2.3 houses and have one kid, or 1.3 houses and 2 kids, I don't know, whichever it was, you go, if that's all it is, it's pretty vanilla. And I'm, more chocolate swirl in a vanilla world, to be honest. So I'd go to bed with this deep sense of dissatisfaction, saying there's got to be more than this. And, I used to sing that U2 song back in university in my sleeplessness, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. And then there was this moment at university where someone was giving a talk on campus, and he basically says, congratulations, you're in free university. You're in the top 0.05% of everyone who's ever existed in terms of, privilege and advantages. And he said, does it make you happy? No. And he said, look, how about I give you a challenge? How about you spend 1 year of your life just giving your life away to others? And you know what? If you hate it, you'll get a full refund on that when you go back to your own privileged life. And I just couldn't escape that. So I ended up taking a year off university. I was in the final year of a 5.5-6-year degree, computer science and electrical engineering at Melbourne University, and just volunteered. Found a little place out in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne, Springvale in the 90s. A lot of gangs, a lot of heroin, a lot of rough sleeping, many issues with some emerging communities that were just finding their feet in Australia. And I found this little organisation that didn't just work in that neighbourhood, they lived in that neighbourhood, and they threw their homes open and took people in off the streets and got involved in the life of their local communities, saying that, it's hope is found here. It's not found anywhere else but here. And I remember the first night I was there, actually, for this 2-week little course I was trying out to see if I could volunteer, falling asleep without that nagging voice in my head. I was in a little share house down a back alley with 4 guys that had escaped the Thai-Burma border when they were escaping one of the massacres that was happening in that country. And I just thought, wow, is this perhaps how I'm meant to live my life? And the question that I found very constructive through that time was posed by a beautiful author named Parker Palmer, and he asked the question, is the life that I'm living the life that wants to live inside of me?
Tell me about that year when you started off with that 2-week course. I mean, were the pathways clear to you in terms of how you could keep doing this work? Like, what did you do next, essentially?
Well, I'm Indian, I'm Sri Lankan, there's Hindu and there's Buddhist, and I was raised as a migrant, Malaysian born, coming to Australia. That's all a wind up to say, we were raised in the Christian tradition, and so we often understand ourselves through stories. And one of the stories that we often were told growing up was, if you find a pearl of great price, what won't you give up to pursue that? And so in the midst of all this questioning and seeking and searching, I found this pearl of great price, which was that sense of passion and purpose. There's a great quote from Howard Thurman that says, don't ask what this world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and then go and do that. The other one is from Viktor Frankl. So I'm just throwing out a bunch of quotes there.
I love them.
We detect rather than invent our mission in life. So what I had perceived in that space was a direction for my life, not a destination. And I thought, if this is the path for my life, then nothing else really matters. And so I dropped out of that degree, even though there's 6 months to go. Much to my parents' disappointment, as the only son of their 4 kids. Back in those days, it was cultural expectation the boy will grow up to provide, even though I have 3 brilliant sisters who are far more intelligent and professionally capable than me. And they've got beautiful names, Shamla, Shimona and Shobana. Beautiful names. And then John. Are you kidding me? Like, seriously. Right? So there were costs along the way, particularly those costs that are associated with some other people's expectations of you growing up in a culture where family and community and provision and shame and honour. I think Western society is more guilt conscious. What have I done wrong? My bad actions reflect on me and me only, whereas a shame and honour culture is your actions either bring honour to your family or they bring shame upon your family as well. So having to break through some cultural norms and expectations as well as societal norms and expectations, because that organisation that I did the 2 weeks with to look for a year ended up being a 20-year pursuit. And, they pursued lifestyle commitments of very similar to the Catholic orders of poverty, service and obedience. So we committed to being rooted in our local communities.
I just want to talk to you about sacrifice, because you mentioned there that obedience is part of your philosophy and your commitment, and it's a religious commitment as well. And I think sometimes we might hear that if we're not religious and go, oh, that's just part of being religious or being a Christian, sacrifice. But the word sacrifice, when you take it at face value, means you're losing something or giving up something. And I would assume that to be hard. How have you, I guess, managed that side of things? Because, living in a community and embracing something like poverty, that's hard, especially if you've grown up in a more privileged lifestyle. How do you reconcile that?
To be honest, Siobhan, I was never worried about the losses that I was making in terms of, I'm 48 years old and, had I stuck to the game, I was probably the last generation where a house near mum and dad was still affordable. And a lot of my friends have bought holiday houses and that have now gone to more than the value of the houses they bought. It was a strange little petri dish I was growing up with in Melbourne. And many of them financially are as stable as you could want. A lot of them are very dissatisfied with life. So I haven't really seen that ever felt a cost. A sacrifice is anything that involves an attachment and a cost. And so I don't count it in that direction. Lisa and I have very few regrets in life, the way we've pursued it. We've had some challenges, particularly as we raised kids in the environments that we did. And, they're young adults now and they're on their ways in life. But, they've got some scars, and perhaps some would say, successful parenting is raising kids that have the ability to pay for their own therapy. But it doesn't mean there isn't a level of that Lisa and I look back on now saying, perhaps we would have done a few things differently in the context in which we raised the kids. So the biggest cost for me is about 20 years ago now, we moved up to Sydney, and I'm still very close, and Mum and Dad are still alive. So watching the WhatsApp family photos, that's the only thing I say, I would have loved to have been there. We're still very close, me and my 3 siblings. We didn't realise how unique and a bit wacky that is, but we're lucky.
Yeah. You've been doing this work a long time, but are you able to reflect on how it's changed you?
Someone once asked Carl Jung, he was taking a class through the Pilgrim's Progress, that book by John Bunyan, and one of his students asked, what's your Pilgrim's Progress been? And he gave this really beautiful answer, which was, my Pilgrim's Progress has been to climb down the 10,000 ladders of who I think I am, to extend the hand of friendship with the clod of earth that I am. And I just resonate so deeply with that. And every point on the path of this journey has always found myself in relationships with people who are so different from myself, and they have helped me walk down that ladder of my own self-image and arrogance and culturally and socially and personally held aspirations. And they've all helped disarm me and help me get to the point where I am beginning to be able to extend that hand of friendship to, the piece of dirt that has combined miraculously to make me who I am, and say, hey, you're not so bad.
What impact have you seen from the work that you've done?
The story that really sticks out at me from this year starts 20 years ago, when a young girl would come to Wayside well before I was there, and she found herself on the streets, addicted to heroin, and often would come in and get some food and whatever clothing she needed for the day, or particularly in winter. And she found herself pregnant, still using heroin. And the person who was in my role beforehand, really made sure she was okay, and would often give her money for nappies and for formula. And everyone around him would say, you are wasting your money. She's just going to go and shoot that up. And yet it was those small acts of kindness that really stood out to her. She was saying, when I was homeless and on the streets, you're invisible. Everyone walks across the road to avoid you. And then all of a sudden, when you become pregnant on the streets and when you have a baby on the streets, you become super visible and everyone looks at you with scorn and disdain. And so it was those little moments of kindness and tenderness that really shone for her. She's a hero. We were just texting this morning of mine. She pulled it all together and got clean and off the streets, and has worked hard to build a relationship with her child, and has had another child that has never known her to be other than this beautiful, caring, loving mum. And about 8-9 weeks ago, in the middle of winter, in desperation, a homeless woman gave birth in Central Station, and
Wow.
in the middle of winter, and she was in deep psychosis and abandoned the baby in a toilet and ran away. And it was only someone walked past and heard a little cry, that they were able to run in and find this child. And as the authorities were looking for a family kinship connection, they found my friend, and they placed this baby into her loving arms. And, every step along the way of love has now added up to saving the life of this beautiful, gorgeous little bundle of joy that we passed around the chapel last week and sang over her, and thought, your beginnings are not your future. You have a tribe, an absolute army of angels around you now to hold you through the rest of your journey on this earth.
Oh, that's an incredible story.
And I got to play about 5-minute role in that, but someone once gave me some really wonderful advice, which is to say, whenever you start any endeavour, particularly in the for-purpose sector, and I'm going to try and de-religiousise it and make it more accessible, he essentially said, don't ever think that you come with the solutions in your back pocket. In fact, whenever you engage in any new pursuit, your first job is to be present, to shut up and to listen and to discern the promises that the Great Spirit that hovers over the land has spoken to this community, and beg that you will be able to hear what those promises are and to find what your role is in inching that forward for whatever little contribution you can make, and then move on. And I thought that's it. We're not the white saviours who come in and if they just did this and they just did that. Imagine if everyone who engaged in any pursuit said, what are the promises? Where's the Spirit breathing and whispering over this land? And what's my role in helping just nudge that forward a little inch? It would certainly reposition ourselves. So, you talked about sacrifice and religion. Religion is the process by which I engage to get myself out of the way as much as possible for as long as possible.
Now I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that relate to Christmas, because that is when we're talking to people right now. How does Christmas at Wayside make the world a better place?
That's a beautiful question. As you have been marinating in the anxiety bubble of Christmas and watching supermarkets portray families at Christmas. By the way, those families don't exist. They're paid actors. Christmas goes like that. Usually someone having a meltdown at some point over some form of napkin or ribbon that was or was not purchased. That's the ideal and the real are two very different things. However, we are so saturated and marinated in the ideal that anything less is a failure. And so often we think of ourselves as failures. But most of us still have somewhere to go and someone to celebrate with. And, the question we often ask ourselves is, how am I going to survive this Christmas with all the plans and preparations and things that are done and undone? People who are living on the streets ask exactly the same question. How am I going to survive this Christmas? This last week has been, for many, the anxiety of their one access visit with their children all year. It's usually timed around now, and it just takes one sniffle from one of those kids, even now in a post-pandemic world, for the visit to be cancelled, because it's a lot to coordinate a few kids being brought together. However, they've been waiting for this moment for 6 months or all year, with such limited context. So hearts are broken, and not broken in a way that happens eloquently. It is the brutality of having your heart broken. Many people have been spending the last few weeks working out whether or not they are invited or welcome at their family celebrations, because of the pain and the trauma. That's that separation and that breakdown in community, which is where our Christmas party, where we lock off our street and we invite everyone to come through, and that's people who are sleeping rough. We have a truckie that comes every year, and he times his run, because it's a great cash run, that he gets to have the middle break right at lunchtime so he can celebrate with you. He goes, I don't want to be alone. Through to parents who have lost a child this year, who know that it will always be difficult at Christmas, but perhaps they can some way find a way to pay forward the love, or to love others. I have a mum who lost a son, and she says she comes to Wayside all the time because she's got a whole lot of love to give, and she wants to continue to pour that out in honour of her son. And so, it might be the first year you don't have access to your children. We have people celebrating. So people from all walks of life. We have a grandma who says, I only get my grandkids once every 4 years. So, because there's so many divorced grandparents and blah, 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 So it's, this Christmas Day is not this picture perfect thing. And so it's a very emotional day. And so when we lock off the party and we have a Christmas dinner with all the trimmings, there's over 1,000 people come through, over 2,000 through the day. We have breakfast, a street chapel service. This whole story apparently started in a shack full of animals, then the street with dogs barking and pooing, a very perfect place for it, to say that hope and new life is born in the most unexpected of places. And so we just have this beautiful celebration that by about 2:00 becomes this huge street dance party. And, if you're not in Australia's longest conga line, you're not doing it right. And it's a beautiful chaos, and it all winds up by about 4 or 5 that night. And, it's just a glorious, beautiful opportunity to celebrate with our chosen family.
What would be one thing folks could do this Christmas to make the world a better place?
One thing, I can give you plenty, but let me give you 2 things. One, a good friend, Aboriginal woman from the Wiradjuri Nation, said to me, "You are who you eat with, love." So I'd say examine our dinner tables. Our meals are the places where we are intimate with others. And so let's examine our tables and ask the question, who's around them, who's not around them, and be really mindful and extend that invitation of love. Through the last few years, we've really focused on loneliness and isolation and social disconnection. So think about someone in your street the way we did during lockdown. Who's making sure she's being taken care of or that person's being taken care of? Maybe even challenge yourself as a family. How do you, love isn't just about good feelings. It's about walking with others, right? Love's a verb. Is there someone who you haven't invited to your family Christmas for years and you've almost forgotten why, right? And extend the olive branch of love to that person.
Jon, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thanks, Siobhan. It's been a lot of fun.
Jon Owen, CEO and pastor of the Wayside Chapel in Sydney. Jon has an abundance of insightful and inspiring quotes and stories. If you'd like to read more of them, check out the links in the episode notes. Next time on A Better World Blueprint, I've chosen an interview that I think is fitting for the new year.
Mindfulness helps you turn towards your anxiety and your anger and know it, and know it's legitimate in some context. And what do you want to do next, knowing that?
I don't know how you feel about a new year, but it can be overwhelming. So what better way to meet it than with Timothea Goddard, Director of Open Ground, a pioneer of the mindfulness-based stress reduction practice here in Australia. Tim has such an expansive and reassuring view of the human condition. I know you'll love our chat. I'm Siobhan Hunt. See you then.